Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics. Yes, you have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo, and I am your host and sensei, Gary Michuta. Welcome aboard, everybody. It's time for us to dive into yet another session where, we strengthen our abilities to explain, defend the faith with clarity, charity, and confidence. And we've got a great show in store for you today. Kenneth Hensley is going to be joining us. He's coming into the dojo after the first break. And, Ken, we've been going through this series for a little while now. He's attacking non-belief by basically accepting its basic principles. In other words, he's saying, look, if you don't believe God exists, there are certain things, certain ramifications, certain consequences that just logically and naturally follow from that presupposition. And so every episode we've been going through, and he's just been appealing piece by piece how, if God doesn't exist, then you run into all sorts of problems in the realm of morals, objective morality, and so on. And we're going to talk about knowledge. How does that affect whether or not we can have certain knowledge of things? So it's been a fun series, so I can't wait to have him on board. It's always fun to talk to Ken on the show. And that's what we have in store. Plus, we have our Finding the Fallacy. Our Finding the Fallacy today is survivorship bias. And also, as always, we meet an early church father, and today's early church father is St. Gregory of Tours. So many of you may be familiar with St. Gregory of Tours. So, this is a chance for us to get to know him a little better, or perhaps if you don't know him, we'll get to know him a lot better. So, as always, you are part of the program. If you want to give us a call us at 888-526-2151, or you can always email us at questions@handsonapologetics.com. That's all one word, questions@handsonapologetics.com. And yes, all the emails do fly through the internet and lands in the dojo mailbox, and I do answer all my emails. And occasionally, I also have some on the show. So let's see, we haven't done our shout-outs yet. So I want to say hi. Shout out to all those watching the social media part of the dojo. Hello, everybody watching on Facebook and YouTube. It's great to see familiar names. Got some new names today. So welcome aboard. Great to have you. And also want to welcome all of you listening on radio across the country and beyond. And also those listening virtually through podcast and other such media. It's great. Thank you. Welcome aboard. And by the way, we're getting into the holiday season, and usually this is when people kind of turn to start helping others. And here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio, we really appreciate your help. First of all, we appreciate your prayers. So please, pray for us, because we really can't do anything without your support and prayers. That's such an important support ministry. Also, another thing you can do that would greatly help us out, and by the way, those in the social media section, pay attention. Like us, subscribe. Tell your friends about Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Tell them about Hands-On Apologetics. Tell them about all the great programs here on the network. Because we want to share the word, and these are incredibly great information-packed shows. So, don't keep it to yourself. Don't be greedy. Spread the word. Tell other people. Like us. Share us. Especially on virginmostpowerfulradio.org. You can access all the podcasts, all the shows, my show, and all the other shows that Virgin Most Powerful Radio produces. And you can do great things like send it to friends, send links. You can even embed it on your website. I don't know. There's all sorts of cool things you can do. And finally, of course, financial. We appreciate financial support because, even though we're doing the Lord's work, we still have to pay the electric bills and so on. So thank you so much for your generosity. And let's see, I think I covered pretty much everything. Why don't we jump to our critical thinking skills? Every episode we sharpen our intellects and help inform them so that when somebody gives a poor argument, you can spot exactly where the problem lies. And we do that through the finding the fallacy. Today's fallacy, like I said, is the survivorship fallacy. Survivorship fallacy is also known as survival bias. It's a logical error of concentrating on the people or things that made it past some selection process while overlooking those that did not, typically because of their lack of visibility. And this can lead to false conclusions in several different ways. So basically, survivor bias is where you focus only on the results of a selection process, ignoring the rest. I'm trying to think. In apologetics, do we run into this? We do in some ways, not a lot. Nevertheless, basically what you want to do is you don't want to just arbitrarily discount, certain data. I think, one way we do this with the early church fathers is we usually, for the right reasons, we appeal to only authentic works of the early church fathers. But the fact of the matter is there are some works that are dubious. We're not really sure whether, for example, St. Augustine wrote a particular writing or Athanasius or something like that. But I think this is survivor bias because those writings, even though they're pseudo-Athanasius or pseudo-Augustine, nevertheless, they are ancient writings. We're not really sure the author, but they do exhibit a belief at that time, and therefore they still have some weight, some probative weight. So perhaps there, I think you could see survivorship bias being used. So that's a little obscure, but nevertheless, hey, the sensei was able to pull out an example. So, I'm proud of myself for doing that, at least. All right, so why don't we jump to meet the early church father, who is St. Gregory of Tours. St. Gregory, Bishop of Tours, a son of a respected senatorial family in Gaul, which is modern-day France. He was born November 30th, 538. His great-grandfather of his mother was the Bishop of Le Grage, and was also named Gregory, by the way. Nicetas, Bishop of Lyon, was his mother's great-uncle. Gallus, Bishop of Clermont, was the uncle of Gregory's father's side, and Gregory's father, Florentinius, died young, and it was up to Gallus, Florentinius's brother, who imparted Gregory with his early Christian teaching. So right there, you have St. Gregory of Tours coming from a family who has lots of clergy in it. And, that's kind of funny because not only with the early church fathers, but the saints, it's interesting how many saints are related to other saints, or, their family trees go into other saintly family trees. And that's certainly the case with St. Gregory of Tours. Now, soon after his ordination to the diaconate, Gregory was taken ill. In about the year 563, he was made a pilgrimage to the shrine of St. Martin of Tours, in which he hoped for a cure. 10 years later, in the middle of his 30s, he was elected Bishop of Tours to succeed another one of his mother's relatives, Euphronius of Tours, who died in 573. Gregory was a man of particular grace and honor, even amongst his peers and contemporaries, enjoying enormous respect throughout Gaul and serving often as an emissary for the king. The only thing that prevents our styling of Gregory as the greatest romantic of the Romantic age is the fact that such titles belong already perpetually to his friend Ventinius Fortunatus. Gregory died on November 17th, possibly 593, but more likely 594. He's best known as his History of the Franks, which is 10 books, and also another book, The Gloria of Martyrdom, and his 8 books of miracles. Now, some really cool stuff from Gregory. I just want to quote a couple. for example, he has a lot to say about Mary. So this comes from his 8 Books of Miracles. It says, the course of this life having been completed by Blessed Mary, when now she would be called from the world, all the apostles came together from their various regions to her house. And when they had heard that she was about to be taken from the world, they kept watch together with her. And behold, the Lord Jesus came with his angels, taking her soul. He gave it over to Angel Michael and withdrew. At daybreak, however, the apostles took up her body on a pyre and placed it in a tomb, and they guarded it, expecting the Lord to come. And behold, again the Lord stood by them, and the holy body having been received, he commanded that it be taken to a cloud into paradise, where now, rejoined with the soul, Mary rejoices with the Lord's chosen ones, and in the enjoyment of the good of eternity that will never end. So that is an interesting passage from Gregory of Tours. And of course, that talks about the narrative about the Assumption of Mary, body and soul, into heaven. Notice in this story, Mary dies. Her body is separated from her soul, and then later her body is taken up to heaven and rejoined with her soul. And that is, in the East, you have this tradition of the Dormition of Mary, that Mary died and her body was taken up to heaven. This kind of reflects that tradition. Another text, he says, but Mary, the glorious mother of Christ, who is believed to be a virgin before and after she bore him, has, as is said above, been translated into paradise amid the singing of angelic choirs, whither the Lord preceded her. So in this passage, of course, we see Mary as perpetual virgin, and also another reference to the Assumption of Mary. And that's our early church father for today, Gregory of Tours. Coming up on the other side of the break, Ken Hensley's coming into the dojo to talk about atheism and knowledge. Stay tuned.
Welcome to our January 11th, 2020 Spiritual Warfare Conference. Every year without fail, this is our most popular, well-attended event. This year's Spiritual Warfare Conference will host Adam Bly, a Catholic demonologist, and an auxiliary member of the International Association of Exorcists, along with Dr. Luis Sandoval, a psychiatrist who's part of the Healing, Deliverance, and Exorcism team for the Diocese of Orange. These two gentlemen bring tons of experience and expertise in the area of spiritual warfare. This is going to be a high-information Catholic seminar. I'll be there as well, sharing some riveting stories on the diabolical and liberation found through Jesus Christ from my best-selling book, The Devil in the City of Angels. Mark your calendars, come and join us, and meet other radio hosts from Jesus 911. Contrary to popular belief, spiritual warfare is not demon-centered, it's Christ-centered. Come join us and learn how to armor up and fight the good fight of faith. Catholics, wake up. Don't hit the snooze button. Join us at St. Christopher Catholic Church, 629 South Glendora Avenue, West Covina, California, on January 11, 2020. See you then. Strength and honor in Jesus' name.
In 1 Corinthians 13:13, St. Paul says, "So there abide faith, hope, and love, these three." According to St. Ignatius of Antioch, faith is the beginning and love is the end. And God is the two of them brought into unity. Then comes everything else that makes up a Christian. May God grant that we may attain all the virtues that make for authentic followers of His Son.
Yeah, so Richard, just let me know when.
Buying or
ready.
selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands on Apologetics. And we are going to talk about non-belief and its consequences. And we're going to continue our series with our good friend Ken Hensley. Ken Hensley is a nationally known Catholic teacher and author who, since converting to the Catholic Church in 1997, has worked extensively in the field of apologetics. He has been interviewed numerous times on Catholic radio, television, frequent speaker at conferences around the country. And Ken specializes in a wide range of subjects from natural, Christian, and Catholic apologetics. He works as online resource and pastoral care coordinator for the Coming Home Network. And you can get all of Ken's great stuff available at his website, which is www.kennethhensley.com. And Ken, welcome to Hands on Apologetics.
Good to see you again, Gary. Good to hear from you.
Yes. Well, it's always fun to have you on the show. It's almost like, my monthly infusion of Ken Hensley wisdom.
Well, I guess I have to say that's kind of you, right? Otherwise, you sound like a jerk and an idiot.
No.
But I enjoy our conversations very much. I look forward to it
especially this line of conversation, because what I like about it, it's not a typical approach. Usually with theistic apologetics, we try to we construct demonstrations or proofs for the existence of God, and largely, you rely on some abstract, thinking and stuff, and that's fine. But I love your approach because you kind of take the flip side of that and just assume, well, if God doesn't exist, then there are certain ramifications to that presupposition.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's well, let me put it this way. I was speaking at a conference on atheism about 9 years ago in North Carolina, something that Patrick Madrid had put together. And I was giving some of these talks, a series of 3 talks on the same subject. And Ed Fazer was there too. You're familiar with him, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had him on the show.
Ed is amazing, and he's sort of the king in my mind right now of those who are putting forward Aquinas' 5 ways. The more traditional and standard proofs for the existence of God. Anyway, at the end of the weekend, he and I sat in a pub together, having a beer, waiting to go to the airport, and I presented this position to him. And, and I pushed it through, and in the end, now if he hears this, he may want to come on and debate it. But in the end, he said to me, although it sounded weird at first, in the end, he said to me, no, your approach is sound. Okay. It is the reverse. The way I think of it is this, St. Thomas Aquinas, let's say he begins with, with something, movement in the universe. All right. He begins with movement in the universe, and then he moves toward the conclusion that there must exist an unmoved mover. God must exist, right? Mm-hmm. I just turn it around the other way, and I say, my approach is to say, unless you presuppose the existence of an unmoved mover, you can't account for movement. That's all I'm doing, really, when you think of it. We're just going through all these various aspects of life. Unless you presuppose the existence of a moral God who created us in his image, you can't account for moral law, and on and on and on. So it really is just sort of looking at these things in the from the flip side. And the reason that I think it's important and powerful is because atheists go around just assuming all the time that they're the ones on solid ground, and that we're the ones who have something to explain, and they have this kind of cocksured feeling that they can just lean up against the brick wall and smoke a cigarette or something while we chatter away trying to prove the truth of our position. And I feel like using this method puts them on the spot too, and makes them realize they have a worldview to defend as much as we do.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, because just denying something that's only half the story. You also have to fill in the what you just denied. Well, then what else is it?
Yeah, and what's your explanation? That kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing I love about it, it's very accessible. It's not as abstract as a positive proof. I mean, it's really just common sense. I mean, you're just connecting the dots.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's another reason why it's my favorite approach to use in evangelism as well, is because it's much simpler. It's much easier to understand in a way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So, so I love this approach. We've already gone through several different layers of consequences for denying something as fundamental as God, right? So
Yep.
you want to take us on like a little review, and then we'll just come up to today's topic.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess I'll just state it at this point. What we're doing, though, again, this presuppositional approach that I'm taking is to climb into the materialist or the atheist worldview. You know, say, oh, okay, this is what you believe. Step into the atheist room, as it were, and take a look around, and think through what the logical implications would be if atheism were really true, if materialism were really true. What would naturally follow if it was really true that there was no God and that nothing existed but material particles interacting according to strict material laws? What would really be true? And so what we've done is we've looked through a number of issues so far. We've looked at the issue of human value and worth, which we all seem to assume to be true. And we found out that on an atheist premise, there's no basis for believing that human beings have any more worth than cockroaches do. There's just no logical basis for it. We looked at human rights, and we've noted that many atheists are at the forefront of fighting for human rights all around the world. Well, if atheism is true, inherent human rights do not exist. The only rights that would logically exist are rights that we simply grant to each other. You know, I decide to grant you a right, you know, or we as a republic grant people rights. But no inherent right or human right exists in an atheist universe. We've looked at morality, and we've seen that laws of morality or objective morality would not exist in a materialist universe. We've looked at meaning and purpose, and we've seen that no intrinsic meaning or purpose would exist. If you're an atheist and a consistent atheist, then you have to simply say the entire universe is an accident. We are an accident. There is no meaning or overall purpose to human life. We're just going to burn out in the end, and the whole thing is meaningless. Yeah. Then we've gone deeper, and we've looked at human consciousness, and we've seen that even the idea that you have, Gary, that you exist as a person, or the idea that I have, that I'm someone, dissolves in an atheist universe, because the reality would be that I'm no one, that I'm just a pile of protoplasm. I'm a biological machine, and my brain, in a sense, is playing tricks on me and making me think that I'm a someone when I'm really a no one. I'm just a machine. And then we've looked at free will, too. If materialism is true, it only follows logically that there's no such thing as freedom, because everything in a material universe is determined, mechanically determined by material laws of chemistry, laws of physics, which means what I'm saying right now is what I have to be saying, and nothing more. And then we moved on to look at the idea of knowledge last week. And that's the one that we started last month. That's one we started on, and the one we're going to continue with today, because it's my assertion. This kind of goes to the deepest level in a way. It's my assertion that that a consistent atheist cannot even account for knowledge at all.
Very good.
That the knowledge collapses. And so what I'd like to do, if I can, in the few minutes we have of this first segment, is kind of rehearse the points that we made a month ago and bring us up to the present. Okay, is that good?
Sounds great. Absolutely.
Okay, this is what we looked at last month on this issue. Okay, materialism. What would materialism mean if it's true? What would it mean for the possibility of knowledge? And we went through 4 steps. And again, they're just logical steps. Step one is this: if our universe really consists entirely of physical particles, material substances, then you and I, as a part of the universe, must also consist entirely of material substances, physical particles. That's just a very simple, basic first step. And I quoted from Paul Churchland here, an atheist philosopher, who says, "The important point about the standard evolutionary story is that the human species and all of its features are the wholly physical outcome of a purely physical process. If this is the correct account of our origin, then there seems neither need nor room to fit any non-physical substances or properties into our theoretical accounts of ourselves. We are creatures of matter, M-A-T-T-E-R, okay? That's step one. Creatures of matter, there's no need and there's no reason to fit any non-physical substance, anything like a soul or a spirit, into our account of ourselves. We are creatures of matter. Step two is this. If this is true then, Gary, then our thoughts and our ideas, even the process of reasoning, must be a material reality as well. Whatever you're thinking in your head right now, as you look at me and I see you kind of just nodding thoughtfully, hey, it's just an excretion of your brain. It's a material reality.
Right.
Even the process of reasoning that I'm using as I talk is a material reality, which leads to step three. Step three was this. If this is true, if our thoughts and ideas are reducible to physical processes, then they must be determined by those physical processes, because this physical universe is a closed system of causes and effects. It's a deterministic system by nature. And so if my thoughts are reducible to material realities, material causes, then they must be deterministic as well. So you and I are material, step one. Step two, our thoughts are material. Step three, our thoughts are totally determined by physical processes. And this is why one atheist philosopher could say that our brains produce thoughts much the same way that our liver produces bile. And Charles Darwin once described thoughts as excretions of brain, which I think is really kind of a nice image. Just like if I take a piece of steak, out of the store, and I grab it and squeeze it and some juice comes out, It's like your brain is just excreting thoughts and ideas, and even the process of reasoning is an excretion of brain. And that led us to point 4. I'm getting this in on time. Step 4 was simply this. If all this is true, then why should we trust our thoughts to be true?
Right.
Why should we conceive of anything we have in our heads as describable as knowledge? Why? If it's all physical, if it's all caused by physical, if it's determined by physical processes, why do we call it knowledge? And the famous atheist scientist Haldane, J.B.S. Haldane, once said it himself. He said, if materialism is true, it seems to me we cannot know that it is true. If my opinions are the result of the chemical processes going on in my brain, they are determined by the laws of chemistry, not those of logic.
Very good. And you did a perfect job, Ken, right on the money. And I love that quote from Haldane, too. We're chatting with Kenneth Hensley about the ramifications of atheism in regards to knowledge. So more on the other side of the break. You're listening to Hands on Apologetics.
Welcome, Daniel. You're on the line. What's on your mind, brother?
Hi, I just wanted to share a testimony about Virgin Most Powerful Radio. I had a buddy at work who, he's a lukewarm Catholic guy, and I wanted him to start listening to the Terry and Jesse show, so I kept telling him to download the app, and he kept putting me off. So one day, I grabbed his phone, and I downloaded the app for him. I went on vacation, and I kept telling him to listen to it. He was kind of put me off. I came back from vacation. He comes to my cubicle, and he says to me, hey, man, I've been listening to the Terry and Jesse show, and it's great. And it's made a big impact in his life. The guy, he's going to weekly adoration a couple times a week. He goes to the Mass in the morning. Mm-hmm. He's an on-fire Catholic, and he promotes the Terry and Jesse show on the Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Wow. Daniel, what a testimony. And I want to encourage our listeners to get those cards by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org and do what Daniel's doing. Go out and spread the faith by inviting people to listen to Virgin Most Powerful. Daniel, thanks for your testimony, brother. God love you.
You're welcome.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to support us by going to smile.amazon.com. Click there on our website, log in your Amazon account, and when you purchase products a portion of it will go right back in supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. I want to thank you ahead of time because that supports us year-round. May God bless you and your family.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with Ken Hensley about, the ramifications of denying the existence of God. And Ken did a masterful job for a segment we just talked about, some of the foundations for if you deny God's existence, in a sense, you kind of undermine the credibility of knowledge. I mean, knowledge kind of falls apart. And Ken, I love it that you have lots of quotes from atheistic writers because all the points you make, these are things that, this isn't something you concocted. This is something that atheists readily admit.
Yep. Yeah, it's exactly right. In fact, on each one of those things, knowledge, free will, meaning in life, all these kinds of things, it's easy to find quotations from, and not just some atheist, sitting around it, at the hamburger joint or something, but atheist philosophers, professors who think about these things and they admit these things. Now, of course, they find some way to get along, but yeah, there are quotations from each one of them. They admit this. And so we're talking about knowledge and we're talking about the possibility of knowledge. And this one's a little harder to grasp, than some of the others, but it follows. So here's the situation. Both those who believe in God and those who believe the universe is nothing but particles, both of us think. Both of us reason all day long. Both of us come up with ideas, make proposals, intentions, plans, all this. We're all thinking. And the difference between us is that while those of us who believe in God, we hold a worldview that can account for this, that can make sense of all of this, because we don't believe the universe is nothing but particles, interacting according to strict chemical and physical laws. We believe that God has created us as living, free spirits. And so this makes sense of it. The atheist holds to a worldview that cannot make sense of it. And that's what we're kind of probing. They can't make sense of it. In other words, as much as the atheist desires to be rational and wants to be rational, he holds a view of the world that can't account for rationality.
Ironically, yeah.
Yeah, he seeks knowledge all day long, and I would say because he's made in the image of God, he's not what he thinks he is. But he seeks knowledge all day long using a process of reasoning, and reasoning is governed by abstract, universal laws of thought. So he follows the laws of reasoning, laws of logic as he thinks and comes to conclusions, and yet he holds a worldview that can't even account for the existence of laws of thought. Yeah. Can't even account for the existence of them. The only laws that operate in the kind of universe he's talking about are material laws or physical laws. And so I know we talked last time about that simple syllogism. Premise A, all men are mortal. Premise B, Socrates was a man. Therefore, Socrates was mortal. Even in the simplest syllogism like that one, there's kind of an oughtness. That is, if you agree that all men are mortal, premise A, if you agree that if you agree that all men are mortal, premise A, if you agree that Socrates was a man, premise B, then you ought to conclude that Socrates was mortal. Okay, there's this oughtness where premise A and premise B drives you toward the conclusion of C. But notice this is a logical oughtness that's driving it. It's not a physical oughtness. And
right.
when you try to imagine if premise A, all men are mortal, if that's a physical state in your brain, and then premise B, Socrates is a man, is a physical state created in the brain, then you kind of wonder what law of physics or what law of chemistry would drive the creation of that third, brain state, the conclusion. No, the oughtness is an oughtness of logic. It's not an oughtness. It's not a material oughtness. So the worldview of the atheist is just all kind of twisted up in this realm because it can't explain thought, and it can't explain logic, and it can't explain anything. So the atheist wants to take his thoughts seriously, but then he holds a worldview that reduces his thoughts to chemical reactions in a brain.
Yeah, so someone, for example, if a doctor is able to change the brain chemistry, you could have it would be logical to conclude that Socrates is a dog, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean if you could create some different electrochemical event.
Yeah, or the part is greater than the whole, or yeah, we would call that insanity, right?
Yeah, I mean another way of saying is that I see the atheist imagining somehow that his thoughts, his reasoning somehow escapes, somehow it rises above the deterministic machine of physical cause and effect.
Yeah.
And so they will talk about reasoning or thoughts as being an epiphenomenon of the brain and things like that. But an epiphenomenon of the brain, what does it mean? I mean, if the brain is purely, wholly physical, and everything taking place in it is wholly and purely physical, then an epiphenomenon would be something like mist rising off a pond. You can't escape still the physicalness of the whole thing. And yet an atheist kind of imagines that somehow he's escaping this deterministic machine. And yet he holds a worldview that insists that nothing escapes the deterministic machine, that everything is a part of the machine. And that's why thoughts are excretions of brain. Now,
right.
Now here's a quotation on this from someone who does believe in God. This is a theoretical physicist who believes in God. His name is John Polkinghorne, and this is the way he summarized this idea. Materialism destroys rationality. Thought is replaced by electrochemical neural events, brain events. Two such events cannot confront each other in rational discourse, which is kind of what you were saying about if you could change the brain chemistry, would it be, Socrates is a dog now? Okay, two such events, physical, chemical events, cannot confront each other in rational discourse. They are neither right nor wrong. They simply happen. The very assertions of the reductionist himself, the materialist, are nothing but blips in the neural network of his brain. The world of rational discourse dissolves into the absurd chatter of firing synapses. Quite frankly, that cannot be right, and none of us believes it to be so. It's where he's saying, look, that can't be the truth, and no one believes it to be so, even if someone says, well, I'm an atheist, so I guess that's what I have to believe. No one believes it to be so. So the question I wanted to raise in this session here and the time we have is to ask the question, well, how do materialists deal with this problem?
Right. Yeah, that would be a pretty thorny problem indeed.
Yeah, but of course there has to be some dealing. And the first thing I want to say is that most don't deal with it. The vast, vast majority of garden variety atheists, naturalist materialists that are walking around out there, people that have read a couple of Dawkins books and decided there's no God, whatever, they don't deal with it. And the reason is the same for the other things that we've looked at, that they don't deal with the idea that life is meaningless, or they don't deal with the idea that they have no value, or that human rights and dignity are an illusion, or that right and wrong don't exist. For most of us, thinking, reasoning through issues, asking and answering questions, drawing logical conclusions, these are activities that we've all been doing since the day we were born. And they're so natural to us that it simply doesn't cross the atheist's mind to think that these are activities he needs to account for.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. So you're kind of pressing him to do something he's never thought about before. When you say, well, you need to give an account of this, given your worldview.
Yeah. That's You're right, and that's common even for believers, that we don't always look for the ramifications of our beliefs. Sometimes we can profess belief in God, and then we could go and live immoral lives like God doesn't exist. There seems to be a flip side for non-believers. It's they might deny God's existence, but they live life as if God is here.
Oh, that's a really good. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, so it's like we can be practical atheists. We can say we believe in God, but we can live it at times, and we do, in ways as though there were no God. And the reverse, they can be practical theists, right? We're on an intellectual, theoretical level, they say there is no God, but then they go about their life believing that right and wrong are real things, believing their life has meaning, believing that their thoughts are more than excretions of brain. Yeah, right. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
okay.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't want to steal your thunder, but it seems to me that if what you say is true about knowledge, then what's the point of dialoguing with people or being an evangelistic atheist? Because you can't convince people to change their minds, because that's already predetermined by physical properties and laws.
Yeah, you and I talked about that when we were discussing free will. That we were wondering, well, why do they write a book about it? If they've already said that free will doesn't exist, and that everything we think is totally determined, and everything we do is determined by prior states of the universe, Sam Harris would say, then why write a book? Yeah, why talk about it? Why try to debate in a world in which there's no freedom? So I would say that's another example of how they contradict in their life what they say they believe.
Right. Yeah. Very good.
And they contradict it because it's so natural for them to want to convince people of what they think is true. It's natural because they are human spirits and they're not, just mechanical beings. But anyway, so most don't try to answer the issue, but some, of course, do try to answer it. And the most basic response, first of all, I'll do this one. The most typical response is to say, well, I may not be able to account for thought or laws of logic, anything like that, but whatever, it seems to work. Our thinking does seem to work because we can, make a spaceship that goes to Mars, and whatnot, and we can devise, ways of operating on a brain and getting rid of a tumor and all that. And so, whatever, it must work. And I just want to state clearly, that is not an answer to this challenge. The fact that it works, because the reason it works may well be because materialism isn't true. Right. The reason it works is because God exists and because we are more than, mechanical material beings. The challenge to the atheist is you need to explain how it works given your worldview.
Yeah, very good. Well, we're chatting with Ken Hensley on atheism and knowledge. More to come on the other side of the break. Stay tuned, folks.
This is Jesse Romero.
And I'm Terry Barber.
From the Terry and Jesse Show. And we invite you to listen to the Holy Hour of Power, High Energy Catholic Radio. We're two Catholics with a PhD in common sense. We're on Monday through Friday on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
What we're going to give you is masculine Catholic teachings on the faith. We say we're too inspired to be tired, we're too protected to be dejected, and we're too renewed to be subdued. Why? Because we believe in Jesus Christ and His bride, the Church. And we will take each issue of the day and show you how the Catholic Church has the answer for our culture. What we really do is bring men back into the Catholic Church, which it's about time to do. We want men to be leaders in their Catholic faith so that they can bring their family to heaven.
Our program is not right versus left, it's right versus wrong. And our program is where Catholicism and culture intersect. It's High Energy Catholic Radio.
We're going to inspire you to fall deeper in love with Jesus Christ and His bride, the Church.
The Terry and Jesse Show on the Virgin Most Powerful app.
In Luke 7, Jesus said, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven her, because she has been shown great love. According to St. John of the Cross, Christians should always remember that the value of their good works is not based on number and excellence, Their value is based on the love for God that prompts them to do the works. May we always be motivated by true love for God and not worry so much about what we do, but why we do it.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE, US 1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome, everybody, to Hands-On Apologetics, and we are chatting with Ken Hensley about the non-belief and its consequences, and specifically about knowledge. And actually, Ken, right before the break, you brought up a great response. I think this is probably one of the most common responses, is that when you point out these inconsistencies, they basically say, non-believers would say, well, it works. We can do science. We can live as moral people. We can, our knowledge seems to have some effectiveness in the real world. But like you pointed out right before the music started, that really that's not answering the question. The question is, show me the consistency between your belief in that God doesn't exist and the reason why you believe your thoughts are true.
Yeah, account for it.
Yeah.
Don't just say, well, it works, because the reason it may work is because materialism may be false. It may be working because you're not what you think you are.
Yeah.
That's why your thoughts work, and that's why reasoning works and all that. But anyway, the basic answer that people do give, though, is the evolutionary answer. They will say, the basic response is to say that the process of evolution, random genetic mutations, and natural selection brought about our ability to think, brought about the ability to think, period. And then natural selection rewarded creatures that could think more rationally. So in other words, our ability to think, our ability to reason is one of the gifts of evolution, all right? Stephen Hawking, for instance, took this route. Here's a short quotation from him. Provided the universe has evolved in a regular way, we might expect that the reasoning abilities that natural selection would give us would be valid, and so would not lead us to the wrong conclusions. So the idea is that coming to the right conclusions, correct thinking, is something that would have evolved normally. And now this answer is a little abstract, but I might have to state it in two or three different ways. The problem with this answer is this. Again, it doesn't answer the challenge being made to materialism, and I'll explain why. Okay. If thoughts and ideas are reducible, again, to deterministic physical processes taking place in our brains, such that all of our thoughts, all of our reasoning are excretions of brain, determined physical processes, well, then the theory of evolution itself is an excretion of brain. The theory of evolution itself is reducible to deterministic physical processes taking place in a brain. In other words, when Hawking appeals to the theory of evolution to answer the problem, when he appeals to the theory of evolution to explain our ability to think and our ability to reason and draw accurate conclusions, he's appealing to a theory that is itself the result of deterministic physical processes. So how is this an answer to the question of how knowledge is possible when everything we think is the product of deterministic physical processes? I mean, in other words, he's engaging in circular reasoning. It's a hall of mirrors, as they say, because the whole thing, including the theory of evolution, is a deterministic physical result.
Yeah. So evolution is really just a byproduct of these, predetermined psychochemical things going on in our brain. So you're basically using one excretion to explain another excretion.
Yeah. using one excretion. And, Stephen Hawking even begins by saying, provided the universe has evolved in a regular way. Okay, so assuming one particular theoretical excretion to be true, then it might make sense, he's saying, that evolution would have rewarded right thinking. But even if that were true, there's a problem with that. There is another problem with it. Okay, the first is that it's circular reasoning, using one excretion to argue or to justify another excretion. It's circular reasoning.
Right.
But there's another problem, and that is that evolution, according to Darwin, according to the neo-Darwinian synthesis and view, evolution only cares about reproduction. It doesn't care about truth.
Right.
I mean, it only cares about the ability of a species to live and reproduce, to stay alive and reproduce. And because of that, cockroaches, have done wonderfully well and know nothing. Ants know nothing. So, if what evolution cares about, in other words, is you staying alive and reproducing, then it doesn't care about truth. It doesn't care about abstract truth. It certainly wouldn't care about, that is, evolution wouldn't bring about anything that goes beyond the minimum of what is needed to stay alive and reproduce. And one atheist philosopher, again, I like to go to them, John Searle, someone we've quoted several times. He's an atheist philosopher of mind. He sees this problem. He understands that the theory of evolution doesn't care anything about truth. All it cares about is survival and reproduction. And so he kind of throws up his hands. And this is what he says. I'm not quoting him now, but he basically says, somehow in the course of evolution, somehow for some reason that we can't answer, we human animals have wound up with mental capabilities that go far beyond what we would need to stay alive and reproduce. He says we are baboons with a surplus of neurons. Okay. That's a nice little colorful description. Because, all that evolution should produce in us as a species is the ability to stay alive and the ability to reproduce. So how do you explain the fact that human beings have the ability to compose oboe concertos and violin concertos and have the ability to invent the color TV or to develop unbelievably complex mathematical formulas about curvature of time and space and all that? Oh, yeah, like we need to know that space-time is curved in order to run away from a tiger, and in order to have more children. So, he looks at all this and he just throws up his hands and he just basically says, I don't know what happened. I don't know why it happened. I don't know why, because, evolution would only produce in us the ability to stay alive. I don't know why we know how to write oboe concertos. I don't know why a Mozart exists or a Bach or it's Einstein or anything like that. I don't know why Ken Hensley and, and Gary Machuda are sitting around doing apologetics. If it was a matter of staying alive and reproducing, we'd both be out just looking for better, more money,
Yeah, right. Yeah, this would be the wrong career if you're out to, live comfortably and, not worry about bills.
Totally the wrong career because, for one thing, we don't have any freedom, so thoughts are worthless and meaningless,
Right.
And so it just... Anyway, so those are several answers. One is that most don't think about it, which is kind of an argument in my favor and in our favor as well, because they don't think about it at all because it's so natural to them to think and to reason and to read and all that it doesn't even cross their minds to think that they would need to justify it or account for it. And then when they try and say, oh, okay, well, it works anyway, however it happened, it works, then you can say, well, that's not an answer at all. Because I would say the reason it works is because God exists and God has created us in his image. And as image bearers of God, God thinks, we think. God has a mind and reasons. We have a mind and reason. Just like God is a moral being and we have morals. And then to try and say, well, I think the answer is probably evolution then. Evolution evolved this ability. What do you mean? Evolved an ability to do things that go exponentially beyond anything we would need to stay alive? That doesn't fit evolution. And anyway, the theory of evolution itself is an excretion of brain. So, it's just circular. It's just tied up in knots. But let me hit my conclusion.
Okay.
My conclusion from all this is that let me skip past a few sub things here. Okay, my conclusion is that atheism cannot account for knowledge, all right? And so what atheists often do, if you were to push them down all these avenues, is they might just throw up their hands and say, well, I don't even care then. I can't account for anything. All I know is that things seem to work okay, and I'll just have a practical point of view about it, And I love what C.S. Lewis wrote in his book Miracles on this kind of thing. He actually discussed this issue in his book Miracles, where he said, some naturalists whom I have met attempt to escape by saying there is no ground for believing that our thoughts are valid, and this doesn't worry them in the least. We find that they work, it is said, and we admit that we cannot argue from this that they give us a true account of anything, of any external reality, but we don't mind. We're not interested in truth. Our habits of thought seem to enable humanity to keep alive, and that's all we care about, which is a good way of summarizing what we've been talking about. And then C.S. Lewis says, but unless the naturalist puts forward naturalism as a true theory, well, then we, of course, have no dispute with them. You can argue with a man who says rice is unwholesome, but you neither can nor need argue with a man who says rice is unwholesome, but I'm not saying this is true. And then he says, I feel also that the surrender of the claim to truth has all the air of an expedient adopted at the last moment. If the naturalists do not claim to know any truths, ought they not have warned us of this rather earlier?
Yeah, right.
Or really, from the books that they've written, which is a lot of what we've said, in which the behavior of the remotest nebula, the shyest proton, and the most prehistoric man are described for us, one would have certainly gotten the idea that they are claiming to give a true account of things. The fact is, surely, that they nearly always are claiming to do so. This claim is surrendered only when the question discussed in this chapter is pressed. And when the crisis is over, the claim is resumed. It's tacitly resumed. That's exactly the way it happens, Isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly how it happens. We want to be rational. We are rational. We're teaching you all these things about the universe. And then when you press on and say account for rationality, well, after all, the universe is a random universe. Who knows for sure? Nothing can be known for sure, And then as soon as they walk out of the room, they go back to, okay, look, this is true. That's true. Here's the other thing. They go back to arguing again. So
and you need to believe like I do.
Yeah, and you need to believe like I do. Yeah. So my conclusion is that the atheist is like a man. When I'm debating with an atheist, it's like I'm debating with a man who he wants to use reason. He wants to use logic to debate with me, but he can't even account for the existence of reason or logic or why they should hold. So he's like a guy wanting to have a sword fight with me, but he doesn't even have a sword. And the only way he can get a sword is if I give him one. So in a way, he has to assume the truth of my worldview in order to account for reason so that he has a sword in his hand so that he can then debate with me and prove that God doesn't exist.
Yeah. That's well put. Boy, I hear the music coming up. Ken, how can people get a hold of all your great writings?
Well, if they want to have recorded talks I've given, go to kennethhensley.com and look on the shop page. Those are all the talks that I've got there. Otherwise, I write for the Coming Home Network. If you go to the Coming Home Network's website, there are tons of articles all over the place.
Great.
Thanks, Gary.
CHnetwork.org. Yep. Thank you, Ken. Great show. And the fun continues tomorrow when we're going to have Pat Flynn of the Pat Flynn Show coming to the dojo. And, boy, I can't believe the hour has already flown. And thank you so much for listening. Coming up next, the Terry and Jesse Show, High Impact Catholic Talk coming at you. And we'll talk again tomorrow. Everybody have a great day. Bye-bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.